Welcome everyone back to Insider Gaming. Today we have another very special interview. I'm joined by creative director Paul Coleman from iRacing, but today we're not talking about iRacing. We're talking about the game he is leading the way on, ExoCross. Paul, thank you so much for taking the time and joining me here.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for talking to me.
So we're gonna dive right in. When people hear iRacing is developing a game, and they're leading the way and the company leads the way, they automatically assume it's the traditional racer that we've seen for years because with iRacing and the growth there. ExoCross is a racing game, yes, but completely different than anything that the studio's ever done. For those that may not know, what exactly is ExoCross?
Yeah, so ExoCross is a off-road racing game set in the future, about 100 years into the future. The premise is that the Earth was getting too polluted. Cars, all forms of like fossil fuels and transportation devices got banned. People stopped racing cars for real, but they turned to sim racing as a way of essentially scratching that itch and getting out and competing with one another. So sim racing lasted for a good 100 years, but people started to get bored of it because, ultimately a new generation were coming through that hadn't actually driven real cars. They didn't really know what they were simulating. So the premise with ExoCross is that to reinvigorate sim racing, we've explored deep space. We've looked for planets that are similar to Earth in terms of gravity and flora and fauna. And we've looked for places to take our fossil fuels and essentially tear up other people's planets instead. So you're racing remotely from Earth, from your habitation pod in Earth. You are one of the drivers in the ExoCross Championships. And you're racing these off-road vehicles via communication technology out into deep space, and you're doing it from the comfort of your own home. So it's our kind of tongue-in-cheek take on where sim racing could go at some point in the future, but we've seen it as an opportunity to weave in a story around why people aren't racing real cars anymore. But yeah, ExoCross at its core is a fun off-road racing game that's set out in the distant future on planets that aren't Earth.
So the game started as Drag Outer Zones. It was developed, and I'm going to butcher the name of the studio, and I hate that I do this, but I've still yet to be able to pronounce it properly, and I'm thinking it's Orontes Games.
So it's Orontes.
Orontes. So I was close. I'm
Yeah,
close.
yeah, really close.
So started there. iRacing purchased it, brought it in, took it over. What made just the studio, the game, what made it really appealing to you and the team that this is something you wanted to work on and really develop and grow?
Yeah, I think the first thing that came across about Orontes as a studio was the fact that it was two brothers extremely passionate about the stuff that they do, super talented, like an amazing engineer and a brilliant artist, and they were just working together to make this incredible game as a pair. And the way they made this incredible racing game was to build an awesome engine, and the Orontes engine is essentially built out of their hard work, their blood, sweat, and tears. But they've built it in such an incredibly forward-thinking and future-proofed way that I think the main thing that the guys at iRacing saw when they approached them was just the opportunity and the sheer kind of passion that had been poured into that engine, but also the fact that it was so well put together and it could run, at an amazing frame rate, look great. It offers huge potential, and it's not just purchasing drag as a title and that being the end of it, which is what happens so many times when studios are bought up. This is actually about investing in the technology and using that as a foundation to then build a whole series of games on that tech going forwards.
So the game, I mean, you talked about the tech coming in and that engine. Granted, it's not just that engine. Like, they're leading the way. Like, you're using it for ExoCross, but it's also got the influence of the iRacing simulation engine, the way it plays, how was blending that, what they had already built versus what iRacing offers and is already built, and making sure everything meshes to where nothing either changes the gameplay drastically from what it was or even breaks it?
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest challenges when you kind of parachute into a project, is to kind of have a sit rep, understand where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are, what the scope of the project is, and what the company actually wants to get from it, and then you start bringing together the needs of the business, obviously the desires of the community and the players, and what already exists, to try and bring that together into a coherent package that really still surprises and delights the audience that are going to play it. The beauty of the engine is that so much of it was working well already, so that it already had that running for it. But there were areas that we definitely wanted to play with and improve. iRacing as a company, anything that comes with the iRacing logo on it has to stand for great on-track action, wherever that is, whether it's dirt track racing, whether it's NASCAR, whether it's the simulation that the core product represents, or whether it's ExoCross, which we're making. It has to be an excellent on-track experience, and it has to represent awesome vehicles driving around tracks. So that was the key thing that we wanted to maintain, but actually improve upon. So there are key areas with ExoCross that we have played with and we've improved. The way the vehicles drive, the tire model, all of these things are things where we've brought in experts from iRacing to help with that. As we move towards making it a console product, one of the key areas that we've added is AI-based racing. So AI are coming in and they're giving you competition to race against without you having to head online to have wheel-to-wheel action. The AI system has basically been brought over from iRacing, where we know that iRacing has one of the greatest AI systems in the whole racing genre. So why not bring it in and use it and build on that strength? But then there's also stuff that we're doing within ExoCross that will hopefully then feed back into iRacing as a bigger product, and hopefully improving those areas.
So when you talked about like finding what worked, what didn't, was there anything, because I believe it was 2021, late 2021, that iRacing acquired the studio, started working on it. Was there anything that you saw that Drag had before the development changed into what ExoCross is becoming, that you felt like, okay, we need to either change, remove, anything like that just didn't really work into the vision that the studio now had for the game?
I think the key thing was how it was packaged and whether that would work for a console audience. I think as an early access product, it showed the promise. It definitely gave enough challenge for players to keep coming back, keep racing. There was some good online there where players could group up and meet up and play together. But it didn't feel like a coherent package. It felt like something that was still in development. And that is ultimately what early access is. You sign up for a product in the hope that it's going to grow and it's going to develop and it's going to become more than it currently is at the point at which you buy into it. So their roadmap looked good, but AI racing, I think, was one of the key missing features that was, that was the must-have that we put on the table and said, whatever happens, we're going to improve AI, or introduce and then improve AI. Yeah. Obviously, there's the content-based stuff as well. Like looking at the two cars that they had, they were okay, but we wanted to add another vehicle in there so that we could almost get this easy, medium, and hard flavor to the game, and ensure that players had more sense of progression as they moved through the tiers. And then beyond that, making sure that there was a more broader variety of racetracks to go and race on, championships to progress through, so ways to just essentially keep the players playing, and give lots of different types of players lots of different ways to play. So I think original Drag had challenges, which was kind of like a time trial mode where you race against dev set times, then eventually you race against other players on the leaderboard, and it had the online. But there wasn't much else to do in there. By introducing a more single player progression mode, by improving the challenge modes and the time trials, and then further improving the online. I think we've now got a really good coherent console package that will feed back into the PC product, and it will come out of early access at the point that ExoCross goes live. So Drag will morph into ExoCross with all of these new features and elements that we're going to be bringing to console.
Before I get to my next question, this one just popped up. For those who have the people who've already owned Drag on Steam, will that be just a free upgrade? Will it be like a small price bump, or how's that going to work?
It's going to be free. So if you've already invested in Drag as an early access product, we want to say thank you for that, and we want to give those players all of the kind of fruits of our labor for the last couple of years that they've been patiently waiting to see the game grow into something that they hoped it would be when they signed up for it in early access. So yeah, those players will get it for free. Well, because they've already paid for it, so it's not really free. No further price to pay.
Yeah, no extra cost. They're not going to sit there and try and charge $250. You're not going to charge $250 for an upgrade to the game.
Well, we're not going to charge $250 for anything, but yeah, we're not going to charge. We're not going to charge more money.
So you brought up like the building the game for console, and we all know console players they're admittedly a different player group from PC. Like they're looking for different things, replay value. When someone loads up ExoCross, what is going to be the thing, do you think, that really keeps them wanting to come back? You brought up the AI, you brought up like the extra car, like, but if you were to maybe signal out one thing that this will keep you coming back for race after race after race, what would you think? What do you think it is?
I think for me, it's a challenge. I think it's, we're not setting out to make a game that's impossible to beat, but we do want a game that has a nice, gentle, early difficulty curve that then ramps up so that there's quite a high skill ceiling. And I think that's reflected in some of the leaderboard challenges and the ways that we're encouraging players to play. So really, the single player is an onboarding into the wider experience, and then going online to play with other players, going into challenges and special events to compete on the leaderboards. That's where we see there being more longevity and more reasons to keep coming back. I think it's one of the beauty of off-road racing is that it's much harder to get a perfect lap because there's so many more variables.
Yeah.
Loose surface driving, how you set the car up for a corner. There's just so much more than just picking a perfect line and nailing your braking and your throttle points that makes off-road that much more hard to master. So yeah, we are all about making a game that is going to feel fun to pick up and play early on, but is going to have that sort of real mastery level to it, where you feel like every time you drive a stage, you can do that little bit better. You can get that slightly better lap time. And it's that very core fundamental aspect of the game that we're building upon here. We're not looking at other more divisive retention mechanics for this game. I think this is much more about the pure racing experience that we're interested in.
You brought up something that I think gets lost when it comes to developing racing games, at least from like the outsider, from some players, not all. A lot of racing fans are very smart people, but there's some who just what goes into creating that element of to differentiate between off-road racing and asphalt pavement racing, the feeling of the track and making sure it feels as realistic as possible. What was that process like for you guys developing that? Like, was it taking stuff that has been done in the iRacing proper, or was it a whole new process of making sure you guys were matching up like that? Every turn's different. Sometimes you might have divots, I guess, in the track. Sometimes you might have buildup of rocks and whatnot on the corner. Like, what went into trying to make this as realistic of an off-road experience as possible?
So I think, first of all, the tracks that were built for drag were really well put together race circuits, off-road race circuits. They've got the change of surface, the elevation, there's good banked corners. There's also, more kind of engineered elements brought in, like kind of steel grated banked corners So there was a lot to enjoy about the playgrounds that were put together. And with the new zone that we've added in, while the palette has changed and it feels like it's in a very different part of the planet, there is a lot more of the kind of awesome aspects of drag that have then been added in and multiplied within this new zone. So I think getting the racetracks right up front gives you a really good foundation and palette to start playing with. I think in terms of how the game has been developed to really capture the off-road feel, that came in the tire model and the work that came from iRacing. Without wanting to get too much into the secret sauce, the way that the car slides around, the way that it moves the dirt around under the tire, these are things that I've worked on previous games, back in my days working on Rally. So, you know, there is a lot of subtlety and nuance that goes on in off-road handling. It's not just about turning the friction down and saying, hey, you're off-road now, everything's slippery.
Yeah.
You know, there's grip buildup. There's the way that you slide the car around really changes the way that the car moves, whether it's scrubbing off speed, whether it's gaining grip or losing grip. It all very much depends on what you're doing with the throttle, what you're doing with the brake, and how you're managing the weight transfer of the vehicle. Now, that makes it sound like a really heavily intensive simulation and something that, you know, you'd need a top-end steering wheel and a triple monitor or a VR headset to go and play. It's absolutely not supposed to be like that. This is a arcade racer at its heart. But I'm a firm believer in making sure that the core of an arcade racer still sits within a believable physical world, because we're surrounded by physics every single day. You drop something on the floor, the way that it falls is intuitive. When you go out and drive your car, okay, you're not like performing Scandinavian flicks and handbrake turns into the car park, but you still feel weight moving around in the vehicle, and you have an understanding of how the world is moving around you as you transport yourself through it. So it's very important that the world feels believable. Now, we've been able to play with that a little bit because we're going into planets that aren't Earth, and we are taking some liberties with that stuff.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, it still needs to feel like a driving game that you are used to, and one that is fun to essentially throw these awesome off-road vehicles around in. So yeah, a lot of it is in the secret sauce and the tire. But I think we've arrived at a point now where we've got cars that feel, you know, really fun to throw around. You know, you're really modulating the throttle and the steering as you power slide through corners. But there is a, you know, still an ease to how they drive through the stages that doesn't feel like we've had to slap a load of helpers on there to sort of mute how the game feels in order for players to enjoy that. So it's striking that delicate balance between pick up and play and also the mastery of off-road driving techniques.
Yeah, and that pick up and play, like you talked about, that was actually, you basically answered my next question, because I was going to ask about consoles and controller racing, because a lot of people on consoles aren't going, a lot of people who play racing games on consoles will, at least from my time covering these types of games over the years, they just want to like sit on their couch, grab their controller and play. And it's all about, finding that balance. So where there'll be, is it a type of case, actually, I guess a follow-up, where it doesn't matter if you're using a wheel or controller, it's going to feel pretty similar into how things control, because sometimes there's a major difference.
Yeah, I think probably the best way to answer that is to describe how we've developed it. So I think when you make a game that's more focused on the realism and the simulation, you tend to do all of the gameplay balancing and refinement on a wheel, and then you think about how it's going to feel on the pad later. I think when you're making a game that's more console focused, you do a lot of the refinement and balancing with a controller in your hand, and then you check the wheel later on and make sure that that's also working well. So both ways work, and both ways generally end up with the game feeling good in both scenarios. But by doing pad first, you are capturing what the majority of console players will be experiencing, and then checking that against how the wheel feels and ensuring that the wheel does still feel fun. But the wheel, I would describe wheel play in this as more intensive, in that you have to be more off-road with your inputs, so really throw the car in. So where I think on a track racing game you would be more gentle with your inputs, you're trying to do minimal steering really with the wheel, and let your feet do the steering with the rotation of the car. With off-road, you want to kind of do similar, but you sometimes need to make that first input a bit more abrupt to just get the car to bite, and then it's about catching the slide and maintaining the slide with delicate steering input. And I think we've got that with the wheel right now. So I think it'll be fun on both. That's our goal. That's what we're setting out to do. But I want console players to know that it feels great on a pad, and they don't have to go out and buy a wheel to get the most out of this.
So as we start to wind this down, a couple, like, I guess, quick hit questions. The game currently Drag has a demo on Steam. When it transfers and converts to ExoCross, will the demo remain for people who want to try it on PC? And if so, will there be a demo for console players?
Honestly, that is a very good question. I think we would probably look to do alternative ways of demoing the game, rather than just doing a plain old demo like we would have done maybe 10-15 years ago. I think there's interesting ways like free weekends and other promotional activities where we can get more people seeing the game. Potentially we could speak to Microsoft and see if we can get it part of the Xbox Live kind of free to play aspect for a short period of time. There's lots of opportunities for us to get this game into players' hands without needing to make a standalone demo. So I think the short answer is there are no plans to have a demo at this point, but there may be opportunities to play ExoCross through promotions like that will give a broader group of people the opportunity to see it. But I hope that people, take the chance on this and do try it, because I think it's a great deal of fun, and I think the Steam reviews will hopefully reflect that from all the early access players who've already invested.
Will the game be cross-platform for console and PC?
Not cross-platform. It will be cross-generational though. So if I'm playing on PS4 and my friend's playing on PS5, we can play together. Likewise with Xbox and Xbox Series, but we don't plan to do cross-platform for ExoCross. Now, it's not a never say never. There may be opportunity for us to look to do that further down the line. But I think at this point I don't want to promise any cross-platform play, because it's not in our current plans.
So do you think, I'm trying to think of the way the word is, do you think that there's a risk, because a lot of people, like, cross-platform crossplay is just one of those things that gets brought up for every game in today's gaming landscape. Do you think there's that risk of potentially alienating players or limiting that player base to play online, especially, I guess, for a title that maybe people aren't going to recognize as like a game from a studio like iRacing and stuff like that? Like, do you think there's that risk there, like the risk reward from not having that?
Yeah, I think there's always that risk, and my hope is that we do get big enough communities on each platform for us not to have a community of players feeling isolated across these different platforms and not finding a way to play together. My hope is that each platform stands strong, and the players within those platforms can enjoy themselves. There are certain challenges with cross-platform play that require a fairly significant investment in development to ensure that they work well. And actually, the easy part is getting platforms playing together on a server. The more challenging aspect comes from dealing with some of the certification requirements and making sure that Microsoft and Sony are happy with the way that their platform is being represented on the other platforms and how their players are being protected across the other platforms. That's where a lot of the development work and challenge comes in. So yeah, it's something that I think in terms of wish list, I'm with you, and I'm with the community. It's something that we should absolutely be trying to do with every game we make. But I think for ExoCross, we're going to try with cross-generation and see how we go with that, and then potentially expand into cross-platform if the need arises further down the line.
So the game is planned for this summer. That's the latest update. Do you have any specific window as to when this summer is going to be? Early, mid, late summer?
I'm going to say mid. I have a post-it note on my desk with a date on it, but
well, show me the note. I had to.
Maybe you can catch in the reflection of my eyes.
Put on some sunglasses. Some.
So, suffice to say, we are starting to enter that phase where we are getting the game ready to go into certification and submissions, but it's the early phase of that. So, in the industry, it's called pre-submissions or pre-certs, and it's where you get your first feedback from the first parties to understand what additional aspects need to be improved in order for them to pass the certification. So our roadmap is taking us to midsummer. Currently, the wheels are not coming off of that, and we are on track. But we also want the game to feel and play great, as well as passing the core rules that Sony and Microsoft set for us. So midsummer is what we're targeting at the moment. We certainly, as a business, we don't want to be spending too long making this game. We want to get it out there. We want people playing it. And we want to be able to look towards the future for both ExoCross and any future titles that we might be working on. But yeah, like midsummer is the tightest date I'm going to give you at the moment. Sorry.
That's perfect. I can't. I mean, I'd get in trouble if I didn't ask, right? I'd be like, well, why didn't you find out the release? Well, I tried. At least it's on record. I tried. All we know is it comes out this summer. Paul, ExoCross, I mean, it sounds like a fantastic game. I've been following it. Admittedly learned about it like mid last year. Since following it, it just seems, for me as a racing fan, like right up my alley. I'm sure people watching and listening will find it the same way. Is there anything about the game that we didn't touch on that you feel people need to know about as to why they need to give this game a try, or even go and play and experience the drag demo that's out there now, or pick it up in early access on Steam? Like, is there anything?
So I would say that it is going to be quite different to drag, and those differences are measured and calculated to improve the overall gameplay experience. So if you have already played drag, then things will feel improved across the board. If you haven't, then the choice is yours, but I would highly recommend waiting and picking up the game when it comes out, because I think if you go out and try drag, you might not feel what you're going to get with ExoCross. So it's not, the parity is not quite there. I think where you're racing and the vehicles you're running in will feel the same. How the gameplay is, the things you can do, the challenges we've set, they've all changed. And so it is a very different play experience. And as a package, it will feel a whole lot more complete and packaged together. So my advice is to wait a little bit and come and join us when ExoCross goes live in the midsummer.
Paul, thank you again for joining me here. ExoCross, everyone, is going to be available on PC via Steam, PlayStation, and Xbox consoles. You can get more information on iRacing's website and on Twitter. Paul, thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you, Michael. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you.